From TikTok to DeepSeek, Chinese-developed applications are becoming increasingly popular and capturing growing attention from international users, developers and investors. However, China's technological development is increasingly framed as a national security threat to America, fueling a greater sense of competition against China in Washington. Trump declared that the arrival of DeepSeek AI should serve as a wake-up call for U.S. industries, urging the country to focus intensely on staying competitive. Is China, on a national level, engaged in an AI-led tech race against the US? What are Trump's AI policies and how do they differ from those of his predecessor and those of China? How can we prevent the polarization of the digital world? Welcome to The Point with me, Li Xin, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Ben Norton, founder and editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. From Brisbane, Australia, by Warwick Powell, Adjunct Professor at Queensland University of Technology, and from Macau, China, by Lu Gang, founder of TechNode, a global startup platform with a focus on innovators in China and Southeast Asia, also co-founder of Beyond Expo, one of Asia's largest platforms for tech advancements. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So let's take a look at what a lot of people in the American press or on Western press have been talking about is exactly what has been paving the way for China's tech breakthroughs. And they often refer to an ambitious plan China announced in 2017, which is called the New Generation Artificial Intelligence Development Plan. So let's read that out a little bit. The document outlined 3 steps to achieve its AI development goals, and step 1 would be by 2020, overall AI technology and application reach globally advanced level. AI industry becomes new economic growth point. Step 2 is by 2025, AI basic theory makes breakthroughs and AI technology and application tech reach a globally advanced level. AI becomes a major driving force for industrial upgrade and economic restructuring. And building an intelligent society makes progress. And step 3 is by 2030, AI theory, technology and application reach globally advanced level. China becomes global AI innovation center. Intelligence economy and society makes market progress, laying a solid foundation for becoming innovation-driven and economically powerful countries. So this year would mark the end of step 2. Warwick, let me go to you first. First of all, do you think China is on track to achieving its phased goals? And is China really engaged on a national strategic level in an AI-led tech race against the United States?
Look, I think China is well and truly on track in terms of achieving its own objectives. In fact, it's made a bit of a habit out of being on track with the plans that it does lay out for itself, in large part because Chinese policymakers are able to harness the efforts of industry, researchers and people in communities to commit to the goals that have been set. And the reason that happens is because there's obvious public benefit to achieving these kinds of outcomes. Look, in terms of whether it's a competition with America or not, I think that broadly speaking, Chinese policymakers are actually much more focused on achieving the goals of improving the quality of life of people in China and ultimately by 2035 achieving a moderately prosperous society. They are the objectives. It's not about competing with other countries. It's actually about being better yourself.
Ben, how do you look at the strategy just now and what China has been doing to achieve those phased goals? For instance, I notice when going through this plan, there is nothing about beating the United States in terms of AI or tech advancement or being a world leader. It does talk about becoming an innovation center in the world.
Well, I think this reflects the totally different philosophy in China compared to that espoused by the United States. China advocates for win-win cooperation and mutually beneficial development, and it doesn't see everything in terms of a zero-sum game, whereas unfortunately in Washington, much of the rhetoric is this idea that everything is a zero-sum game, the US must be the number one, the idea of American exceptionalism. In his inauguration speech, President Trump emphasized that we need to be the best in the world. We're the number one. We're going to expand our territory and be more powerful than any other country. So these are very different philosophies. And when it comes to technology, we see this in China, where technology is seen as a way of helping to develop the economy and providing better jobs for people. And especially as China has moved up the value chain and can now produce cutting edge technologies, it's a way for China to no longer as be dependent on other countries, especially the United States, because the US, we've seen, has really weaponized its currency in the use of sanctions and tariffs and export restrictions. And it's also weaponized technology. We see that this is bipartisan in Washington. The Trump administration in 2018 launched a trade war against China and targeted Chinese tech companies. And then the Biden administration came in and carried out very similar policies, restricting the export of advanced chips to China. So these are very different philosophies. And one in Washington is about dominance and maximizing profit and not about meeting the needs of the people. Whereas in China, they see technology as part of a larger economic and political ecosystem that's about developing the country and pursuing common prosperity, and then internationally pursuing win-win cooperation.
Mr. Liu, from a private sector perspective, especially from company level, such as those engaged in AI innovation and research, such as DeepSeek, what explains the kind of breakthrough that these companies are trying to make, and are they trying to beat the United States in any way or shape or form to become the AI leader in the world? What goes on in the mind of the leader and the staff of a company such as DeepSeek?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with the other two guests. I think, we've been involved with engaged with the local tech ecosystem for so many years. I don't think, we are talking about competition every day. I think all these tech companies in China, they've been doing it for, many years on these, subjects on the AI. Maybe DeepSeek is, people think DeepSeek probably come from nowhere, then all of a sudden we see, wow, the DeepSeek. But actually, if you look at the AI industry in China, there are so many AI companies here. They've been doing it for 5 years, over 10 years. It's not just DeepSeek. We have so many others. I mean, they are been doing the research, spend lots of effort on that. So I think that also, if you can see all applications, AI power application in China, we have so many good examples. I think all the people here, they benefit from the technology advancement here in China. So I think that's what we see, from a local tech ecosystem. So basically, it's all about technology advancement instead of competition.
Warwick, let me come back to you. It seems the US, or at least some politicians, lawmakers in the United States, are obsessed with the idea of competition, and it seems that they're almost panicking whenever China announces some kind of technological breakthrough. They're like, whoa, 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 we have to do something about it. We have to tighten, the kind of siege around what China can or Chinese companies can put their hands on, so that China doesn't get ahead. Do you see this as a problem? Is there something wrong with this kind of mentality? And what would be the consequence if this kind of mentality sustains in Washington?
It actually confuses competition in an abstract sense with the practical applications of a competitive mentality into different contexts. So in economics, you would normally say that a degree of competition in markets is actually quite an important part of catalyzing innovation, driving down costs, and ultimately trying to deliver the best services and the best products at the best price possible to consumers and downstream enterprises. That's one type of competition. But there are other arenas where that kind of mentality actually doesn't work. And in a cross-border context, that is exactly the kind of environment where you are much better off focusing not so much on questions of competition with others, but looking very much at how you can strive to achieve the best outcomes or achieve the greatest standards that you set for yourself. Now, if those standards that you set happen to also lead the way and others follow, then well and good. What that shows is that you remain at the cutting edge. The second thing is how those new technologies ultimately get translated into economic and social life. And one of the areas where China has consistently demonstrated a very keen sense of pragmatic application is how do all these new technologies get articulated into systems that deliver more convenience, lower costs, better environmental outcomes, and ultimately better social, economic, and ecological efficiencies to achieve a better outcome overall.
China is advocating for open source AI technology and promotes the accessibility of AI services to share the benefits of AI. Ben, why is China not overly concerned with the possibility that other countries may take advantage of such openness and accessibility to overtake China, which can potentially put China at a disadvantage?
Well, I'm glad you asked this question. I think this issue is so important, this issue of open source technology, because we saw, for instance, that the CEO of OpenAI in the United States, Sam Altman, who's one of the most powerful billionaires in the US, he famously was asked about this in a press conference by someone from India. And he basically said that people in developing countries should not try to compete in AI because they don't have the sufficient resources that they need to develop this technology. Because, if you look in the US, these AI companies like OpenAI, which is half owned by Microsoft, these companies together are spending around $200 billion per year on capital expenditure. And the idea is you just flood all this money into the new equipments and new chips and nuclear plants, and you're going to develop the best technology simply through spending more money. But what China has shown is that it's not a matter of having the most resources and the most money. It's about having people who are motivated to innovate. And in fact, having fewer resources can lead people to be more creative and find new ways to get around these restrictions.
Which is probably exactly the case with DeepSeek, right?
That's exactly right. And this is also a signal to many people around the world in developing countries that, yes, you can develop AI. One, you can develop AI because DeepSeek has now made it open source. So people can run it on their own computers and they can do their own research without hundreds of billions of dollars of resources. And it also reflects the different philosophy. Again, I mean, the US philosophy, they talk about competition, but really it's not so much about competition, it's about dominance and hegemony. And in fact, if you listen to some of these people in Silicon Valley, like Peter Thiel, who's another Silicon Valley billionaire who's very close to Donald Trump, and the Vice President J.D. Vance worked for Peter Thiel. Famously, Peter Thiel said that we don't want competition. He wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal titled "Competition is for Losers." And he actually argued that Silicon Valley's goal is to have monopolies. And we see this ideology reflected in the policy of the US targeting China, where anytime there is competition from a Chinese company, what is the response? They ban the Chinese company. They put export restrictions. They put sanctions on. They put tariffs on Chinese EVs. So, I mean, the US talks about competition, but really what it wants is total dominance.
Mr. Liu, what is the kind of response from private sectors to news such as what came out most recently, actually just these days, that the US Commerce Department is looking into whether DeepSeek used restricted AI chips? One source who's familiar with the matter told the press that the Commerce Department suspects the company may have smuggled sanctioned chips from Southeast Asia. So that's the kind of reaction they get when they hear that, a Chinese company is performing better, is doing better, defying the US sanctions. So now they try to look whether they smuggled sanctioned chips. What is the first reaction from companies and people in your positions?
Yeah, I think there are lots of comments because people DeepSeek make everyone always so surprised. I know it's DeepSeek basically come from nowhere. Then people think, oh, wow, we have something from China which can really beat OpenAI. So people started question about the ability, where's the chips come from, what's the technology they're using. So I think it's hard to comment on all these points because we are still kind of outsider. But I think the fact is, we do. I think DeepSeek, the white people and DeepSeek surprise everyone, because DeepSeek it does has kind of unique technologies, which supply the industry. So I think it's I don't know where to go next, but I do think the rising of DeepSeek and also many other AI companies will bring more concern, in US. I think they're going to strengthen of the high level like chips and to be used in China. But on the other way, I think for short term, I think that will bring the difficulties to the AI company in China because we do need all the chips for the like superpower, computing power. But for long term, I think it's in the past like 4 or 5 years in China we've been doing that. I think we spend lots of efforts and try to develop our own chips. So I think maybe it's more strengthened in US, but I'm sure they're going to actually speed up our local chip industries. I hope we can, basically to break the barrier.
Yeah. Well, Warwick, zooming out a little bit from a longer historical perspective, what are we seeing here? I think it is pretty unbelievable, incredible, however you term it, that one country is trying to suffocate another country's economy or technological development, and then when it's not working, they try to come down harder or to use more tools, and then they claim that this is for national security, all kinds of legitimization. And is that what we're actually seeing? All of this in broad daylight. I think that there's something quite remarkable about it.
Yeah, look, we're living through a very dramatic change in the structure of the global economy. And the last 100 years or thereabouts, the global economy has principally been dominated by that of the United States, which has utilized everything within its capabilities from financial strength, technology strength, as well as military strength to maintain a dominant position. From that position, it has been able to garner the benefits of being at the center of a system. That's changing. And it's changing not with one player replacing the next player, which is how I think many in the West sees it, but it's changing by the fact that there are more than one player now entering into the global marketplace, so to speak, which creates opportunities for economic development that have long been absent for people around the world. That's what's happening.
Would you elaborate a little bit more than one players? For instance, are you talking about the European AI application called the chat, for instance, or what exactly do you mean by multiple players coming here?
Look, it's not just in AI technologies, but it's in all sorts of other technology areas now where the barriers to entry for economic development, whether it's in new energy, whether it's in high technologies, whether it's in biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, medicinals, as well as the applications of foundational technologies in supply chain systems and other industries. Those barriers to entry have been dropping. And as one of the guests previously mentioned, once you move away from an economic model that is premised on monopolies, which pushes prices up and creates scarcity, to an economic model premised on abundance, which drives prices down, then the opportunities exist for people all around the world to jump on board and create the applications that they want to use within their own particular environment. So the Europeans are able to do it. People in China are able to do it. And of course, once you can download a foundational AI model, in this case DeepSeek, and run it locally on your own device, whether it's your local computer or whether it's a cheap $200 Raspberry Pi device, and then build applications on top of that, you've really broken the back of a system that has for centuries denied people around the world the opportunities to develop in ways that suit their aspirations. That's the systemic change that we're starting to see happen now.
Ben, what is your judgment of the kind of trend that we're witnessing, that we're riding? And going forward over the next 5 years, what would you predict happening? Will the United States be even more desperate in its attempts to stop time from flowing, to stop this trend from developing, clamp down further on sanctions against China or whoever is, making breakthroughs in technological sense?
Unfortunately, I do expect that to happen in the US, and this is really bipartisan among both Republicans and Democrats. But I think internationally, it's interesting to see the response because many people in developing countries who represent the majority of the world population have been very excited and motivated to see China's innovation, which again has been a sign to people that it's not only the richest countries like the United States that can produce this new technology. There are scientists and engineers and people everywhere who are trying to push for their own scientific breakthroughs. And I think China also has shown that, it has diversified its trade relationships. China's largest trading partner is not the US anymore. It's actually the ASEAN countries of Southeast Asia. And the US thinks, especially Donald Trump, thinks that the entire world depends on the US, and the US can impose sanctions and tariffs and export restrictions and blackmail other countries into doing what Washington wants. But increasingly, we see that there are other options. Warwick discussed how we're in an increasingly multipolar world, not only politically, but economically. China is the world's leading industrial superpower. China has been able to produce basically everything, including now the cutting edge level of technology. And we saw that, 10 years ago, China made this industrial policy of Made in China 2025. And Bloomberg acknowledged that China met nearly all of its goals in this very ambitious campaign to upgrade its industrial structure, to develop advanced technology. So I expect that China will continue moving forward, and some other countries as well will develop, especially Southeast Asia. And I think the United States has to abandon this kind of zero-sum game mentality where only the US can win and everyone else has to lose, because we're in a world where there are more and more options. And the more that the US pursues this policy, the more it actually isolates itself.
One of the former senior diplomats once told me that he thinks there is a problem that the Americans seem to believe they have a monopoly on innovation as well. Mr. Liu, let me go to you. Being a co-founder of one of the largest platforms for tech advancement in Asia, what's the potential here? How much potential are Asians and Asian companies hold in terms of technological breakthrough, especially given the kind of trend we're witnessing, if you agree that is the kind of trend we're riding?
Yeah, I do think that's the trend. So maybe I can just give a quick example. There's a big tech expo every January in Las Vegas, which called CES.
Right.
I've been there this year, but basically, if you went there, so you can see all I think not all, maybe the most of the tech innovation or related tech products, they all brought from Asia, China, Korea, Japan, all the key players at the world's the biggest tech, showcase, stage. So which actually reflect, which is already the fact, is that Asia is becoming the center for tech innovation. And
so let's make it
maybe
clear. Let's make it clear. Are those products innovated, meaning the idea behind it, the core technology behind it, or were they produced, they were assembled in Asia? I mean, what can you tell us about these two different?
Yeah, maybe I think that's probably the key point. I think maybe 5 10 years ago, is I think the technology itself invented in American market, US, and manufactured or commercialized in Asia. But now is the trend is right now, first of all, I think the manufactured power in Asia is getting stronger and stronger, which is a fact. But on the other hand, we also see like the AI, we also see the software side, basically the core technology, coming from Asia as well. Of course, now that's why people think they're the competition, and also why US spends so much effort and try to protect its so-called their own technology. Maybe just pin back to the open source, part. I think it's quite interesting part. If you look at historically, actually US is really support open source. It's been, for many years. You look at Red Hat, the system, Android, they all kind of open source, and US doing that for long, way back. But right now, actually, it's China probably the first to say, okay, in the AI space, we're going to do open source. So it's quite interesting, kind of shifting, for philosophy as well.
Warwick, going forward in the next 4 years, what kind of potential implications will US's return to protectionism, technological and trade-wise, what will this return mean for consumers in the United States?
One of the risks for consumers in the United States of a return to protectionism is increased costs as well as reduced access to choice, particularly in terms of some of the newer things that are coming out from other parts of the world. So that's the first set of implications. The second set of implications is actually on the innovation ecosystems elsewhere in the world, because as Ben and others have mentioned already, the source of innovation often is an environment of hardship or constraints and limitations where human creativity and ingenuity are pushed hard to find ways of overcoming or working around those constraints and limitations. So if there are export controls, as there have been over the last few years in relation to things like semiconductors, then what we have seen is the ability of Chinese entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, and technicians, as well as government policy support, to drive processes that ultimately leverage the constraints into development and fast-tracking that development. So we're going to see, I think, potentially a double-edge effect. One is increased costs and a reduction in options and choices for the consuming countries, but also catalysts for China and others in the world to keep pushing ahead with innovation.
What would be a sensible thing to do and a possible thing to do for the Trump administration then, Warwick?
The objective really is to maximise the living standards of the people of your country. And to do that, you often need to find ways of collaborating with others and looking for common ground. That would be my strongest suggestion to economic policymakers in the Trump administration.
Ben, what would be yours?
Well, this is a complicated issue. I think there's an inherent contradiction between the financial sector and the industrial sector. And Trump has this idea that I think a lot of people share, that the U.S. should reindustrialize. And there are parts of the U.S. that have been abandoned economically, like the Rust Belt. And I think this would be a good policy. But Trump has surrounded himself with many billionaires. His Treasury Secretary is a hedge fund manager. So Trump has this idea that he can just simply put tariffs on everything and magically the United States will reindustrialize. I think he should actually look at what China did to industrialize very quickly and realize that it takes state control over the financial sector, it takes concerted industrial policy, and it takes a plan. You can't just say we're going to tariff everything and magically we'll develop this technology. I think actually what the U.S. could do is borrow policies from China and invite Chinese investment and create joint ventures and have technology transfer. These are the things that China did in the 80s and 90s and 2000s that were very successful.
We are going to leave it there. Time has run out. Many thanks to my guests, Ben Norton, founder, editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report from Brisbane, Warwick Powell, Adjunct Professor at Queensland University of Technology, and from Macau, China, Lu Gang, founder of TechNode, a global startup platform with a focus on innovators in Asia and China. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Li Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for joining us. You've got The Point.